The tale of an eccentric whose sheltered life takes an unexpected turn. Two monologues on Masterpiece Theater.
Funding for the MacNeil-Lehrer NewsHour is provided by the professional contractors of NECA and union craftspeople of IBEW Local 48, providing vision for the future.
And by Kinko's, the Copy Center, offering a wide range of business services 24 hours a day.
Good evening. I'm Robert MacNeil in New York.
And I'm Jim Lehrer in Washington. After our summary of the news this Wednesday, we look at the administration's changed economic outlook with Deputy Budget Director Alice Rivlin and economists Michael Boskin and David Gordon. Then come a Middle East peace update, a national service trial run in California, and a clearance-page essay about a place called Cabrini Green.
New York Life is proud to provide funding for the MacNeil-Lehrer NewsHour. Yet another example of New York Life's wise investment philosophy. Funding has also been provided by PepsiCo. And by the Archer Daniels Midland Company. ADM, supermarket to the world. And by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by the annual financial support from viewers like you.
The Clinton administration today sharply cut its forecast of economic growth for the year. Administration officials had originally predicted a 3.1% growth rate for 1993, but now believe it will be just 2%, with an improvement to 3% in 1994, also less than originally forecast. They blamed the slower growth in part on the failure of Congress to pass the president's economic stimulus plan. The President's Economic Council chairwoman, Laura Tyson, said low inflation and interest rates had laid the groundwork for stronger future growth. She said she did not expect the lower growth projections to cause the broad public dissatisfaction that plagued the Bush administration.
The first 6 months of the administration, we were able to create nearly as many private sector jobs as were created during the 4 years of the Bush administration. I think we are seeing here a situation in which what matters is not just the growth of the economy, but the growth of jobs and what happens to the unemployment rate and what happens to people's incomes.
The Commerce Department reported that personal income fell in July, resulting in the first back-to-back decline in 39 years. Income was down 0.2%, due partly to the Midwest floods and a drought in the Southeast. At the same time, consumer spending rose 0.4%. It was the fourth consecutive monthly rise. In a separate report, the government said construction spending fell 5% in July, the first decline in 3 months. We'll have more on the economy right after the news summary. Jim?
Defense Secretary Aspen released a review of post-Cold War defense needs today. It includes a 5-year plan that makes few reductions in forces and has greater emphasis on developing modern weapons. But Aspen said further base closings may be necessary as part of the absolutely critical need to cut the military's infrastructure. He talked about the review at a Pentagon news conference.
It has produced a lean, mobile, high-tech force ready to protect Americans in this new time. For decades, this building has focused almost all of its planning, budgets, force structures, the way we organize our forces. Everything has been focused against the Soviet threat, even to the extent of the way we designed our weapons. We designed our tanks, our planes, our ships with war with the Soviet Union in mind. We now face a time in this building is in a brand new era. We face a time when that is gone. There is no more Warsaw Pact. There is no more Soviet Union.
The plan resulted from a 5-month review by Pentagon officials. Senate Minority Leader Bob Dole has urged President Clinton to reorder U.S. foreign policy. He did so in a letter released today. He called for a turnover of Somalia military operations to the United Nations and African countries, and he urged Mr. Clinton to take a more active stance in Bosnia, which he described as an area where U.S. interests are at stake.
Hurricane Emily is no longer a threat to land as it moves into the Atlantic Ocean off New England. Yesterday evening, the major impact of the storm was felt on North Carolina's Outer Banks, but they were spared from the full force of Emily's 115-mile-an-hour winds as the eye of the hurricane stayed offshore. On Hatteras Island, the highest winds were clocked at 98 miles an hour. Several homes there were destroyed. More than 100,000 residents and vacationers had already evacuated. The only fatality was farther north. A 15-year-old swimmer was reported missing off Virginia Beach. While damage assessments are not complete, several beachfront houses were destroyed by heavy surf and erosion. Hurricane warnings were lifted this morning and people began returning to assess Emily's aftermath.
Louis Freeh was sworn in this morning as director of the FBI. He's a former FBI agent, federal prosecutor, and federal judge. President Clinton spoke at today's swearing-in at FBI headquarters in Washington. He called Freeh a brilliant investigator, a tough prosecutor, and a born leader. Freeh talked about the nation's crime problems.
If we saw in this morning's news reports that a foreign power had killed 25,000 Americans or raped 106,000 American women, we would be at war by the afternoon. And yet there seems to be a sort of fatalism among many that crime can be sharply and permanently reduced. Perhaps we have become so used to crime growing in small increments over the last 30 years that we no longer recoil in horror to find it an indelible part of the landscape. It seems popular for some to say we live in a time of diminishing expectations. Well, crime is not diminishing, and we should not have diminishing expectations that we can make sacrifices to win the war against crime.
Freeh replaces William Sessions, who was fired by President Clinton in July following allegations of ethical improprieties. Attorney General Reno said today the Justice Department will not fight the return of alleged Nazi war criminal John Demjanjuk. Yesterday, the U.S. Court of Appeals said he could return to the United States to pursue the appeal of his 1986 extradition to Israel. Demjanjuk was accused of being the notorious Nazi prison guard known as Ivan the Terrible, but his conviction was overturned by the Israeli Supreme Court.
Middle East peace talks continued in Washington today amid word of progress in Arab-Israeli negotiations elsewhere. Israeli and Palestinian representatives held the official negotiations at the State Department. But a Palestinian spokesman said the PLO and Israeli officials in the Mideast also were negotiating by telephone to finalize their mutual recognition pact. The historic agreement for Palestinian self-rule is expected to be signed in Washington within the next several days. Jordan's information minister said today his country was close to an agreement with Israel. He said it would not be a peace treaty, but a step towards settlement between Israel and Jordan. At the same time, Syria's chief negotiator denied that his country was conducting secret talks with Israel on its withdrawal from the Golan Heights in South Lebanon. He was reacting to a Reuters news agency report that said representatives of the two countries had been meeting in Spain for 2 months and were close to an overall peace settlement.
Bosnian peace talks collapsed today, just as the warring parties were reportedly close to a final agreement. It happened after Serbs and Croats refused to give in to further Muslim territorial demands at the Geneva negotiations. Vera Frankel of Worldwide Television News narrates this report.
Hopes of a breakthrough dashed. The Muslims pushed their Croat and Serbian adversaries too far, and the talks collapsed.
Do we expect an agreement today?
We committed ourselves to the peace process and made painful and unjust concessions. Unfortunately, it seems those who have benefited most from this war are unwilling even to offer these most basic compromises.
Izetbegovic said the war would not continue, but the Croatian leader was more ominous.
There is no other solution than peace. But for that peace, unfortunately, it would be some fight, some weeks, if not months.
The EC negotiator, Lord Owen, was characteristically resigned about the breakdown.
I think the talks have failed because there is not an agreement on the map. This is what always is the issue that splits them. They all want more territory, than either of the others are prepared to give.
The Serbian leader, Slobodan Milosevic, left the door open for further negotiations.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I believe you are informed what happened today, and only what I can add is that I believe that peace plan, whole package, will stay on table.
And if the brutal war is ever to end in the former Yugoslavia, negotiation is the only hope.
Russian President Boris Yeltsin suspended his vice president and a deputy prime minister today. Yeltsin said allegations of corruption against both men were damaging the government. A Yeltsin aide said the suspensions were temporary and could be reinstated if they are cleared by an investigation now underway.
That's our news summary. Just ahead, the new economic outlook, a Middle East update, national service, and a Clarence Page essay.
The administration's new look at the economy is our lead story tonight. Today, the White House Office of Management and Budget scaled back its estimate of how the economy will grow this year and next. It follows downer figures recently on worker productivity, housing starts, new home sales, factory orders for durable goods, and the trade deficit. While there was recent good news on the unemployment rate, output from factories, mines, and utilities, and continued low inflation and interest rates. What is going on with the economy is our question, and it goes first tonight to Alice Rivlin, the Deputy Director of the White House Office of Management and Budget. Ms. Rivlin, welcome.
Thank you.
Why did you lower the estimate for the growth of the economy from 3.1 to 2 for the next year, for this year?
Well, most of this has already happened. We're reflecting what the facts are. The economy grew slowly in the first half of the year. It was disappointing. But we expect that it will grow faster in the second half of the year. That's what most forecasters expect.
What happened that you did not expect to happen, or or the other way around? In other words, what went wrong?
Well, I think the one thing that went wrong is things went wrong all over the world. The growth in our trading partners has been very slow. Believe it or not, although we're growing slower, we're the success story in the world economy. But that means our exports have not been going up. And just things have been sluggish. This has been a disappointing recovery.
Is it sluggish everywhere? I mean, in all sectors of the economy, or are there particular areas of the economy that are being hurt the worst and as a consequence are bringing the rest of it down?
Oh, it's been fairly generally slow as recoveries go. Usually you come out of a recession with quite strong growth. The reason we're optimistic for the future, however, is that interest rates have come down a lot, and the interest rate sensitive sectors, the things that matter, housing and machinery and things that are bought with borrowed funds, basically, have been doing quite well, and that augurs well for the future.
But the housing starts are down, and new home sales are down. So
well, they were down this month, but housing has not been doing badly. It's been doing quite well.
But as a practical matter, the normal things, the good things that happen from low interest rates are really not happening, are they?
No, I think they are. In housing, investment has been stronger than other kinds of things. But the weakness in exports and the general weakness in consumer spending has been a problem.
Yeah, and can you break it down by sector of the country, or are we talking a national? I mean, there always been.
There are always parts of the country that are doing worse. Now, at the moment, California is the weakest part of the country. And the floods don't count. That's an act of God in the middle of the country, which actually will probably stimulate some rebuilding and other things that show up in the gross domestic product. But the parts of the country that have been affected most have been the far west, and just to some extent the East Coast.
You, just a moment ago, and all economists talk in terms of recessions and recoveries and cyclical things, and things are expected to do this, and they do or they don't do what is expected. Is it possible, Ms. Rivlin, that this is not that this time it will not be a normal recovery? Is it possible that this is a new reality of the economy of the United States and we all got to get used to it?
Oh, there are lots of new realities, and there are lots of reasons why this recovery has been perhaps slower than anyone expected, and nobody expected it to take off like gangbusters. Some of the things that are happening that the economy is essentially fighting against are the downsizing of major businesses, people being laid off as...
And that's permanent in most cases, is it not?
Well, it's permanent for those businesses. They are increasing their productivity by laying off people. Now, the government's doing that too. We're downsizing the defense establishment. So there are negative major factors in the economy to be overcome by a recovery. But we do have a recovery. The economy's growing. It's not negative.
But is it growing in ways that when you look ahead, now the figure for next year that you're projecting is what? 3.3? It's a little over 3%. A little over 3%. Now, on what is that based?
Oh, that's based on what we see happening now, and...
but what's happening now is not very good.
Well, what's happened in the first half of the year was slow growth, less than 2%. And in the second half of the year, everybody expects it to pick up, in part because of the low interest rates.
So, but when you talk about downsizing the government, next week the Vice President is going to announce his reinventing government. 100,000 federal jobs are supposedly at stake one way or another there. Those people got to find work elsewhere in the economy.
That's right, and jobs are growing. Jobs are being created, but there is shifting around, and
are they comparable jobs? Does that concern you?
Yes, it concerns me. Some of them are, but you can't keep on workers that are not needed because a business is modernizing or because the world is changing, because we're no longer fighting the Soviets and we don't need that kind of a military establishment. Those things are facts and have to be adjusted to.
But that's what I was getting back to my question a moment ago, but is it now also a fact, or at least a potential fact, that say these people this group of workers is downsized out of work, and they get new jobs are created in the economy, but they're not comparable jobs. So the numbers add up, but the economic numbers don't jive as a result. Am I right about that?
Well, lots of new jobs are being created. Many of them are in the service industry. Some of them are high-income jobs, and some of them are not. We're moving toward more high technology, and many of those jobs are very good jobs.
And so, okay. So as far as you're concerned, then there is legitimate reason to be optimistic. You won't be here 6 months later saying, well, we were wrong again, and we'll have to lower it again?
You know, economists are never sure they're right. But this is not a huge change in the forecast. Everybody was expecting that this recovery would be sort of slow. And it's been a little slower, in large part because of what's happening around the world.
You say it's not a huge change. Well, then you characterize the change. How would you describe it? I mean, how important is what you all did, and how important is the change that is reflected in these numbers?
Well, I don't think that we're making big news today. We're talking about a forecast for a year that is almost 3/4 over, and so that's not a big forecast. What we did today was to update our forecast of the economy to say it was a little slower in the first half, but we expect it to be pretty much on track after this, and to reflect in those numbers in our estimates of the budget. And that's where the good news is, I think, that as we look ahead at the budget deficit, we see a much lower deficit than one would have thought a year ago. Now, that's largely because the President's policies have been passed by the Congress.
All right. Thank you. Robin?
And now 2 other views. David Gordon is an economics professor at the New School for Social Research in New York. He was an advisor to Jesse Jackson's 1988 presidential campaign. Michael Boston was chairman of President Bush's Council of Economic Advisors. He's now a visiting scholar at the American Enterprise Institute, a Washington, D.C. public policy research group, and he joins us from San Francisco. David Gordon, in layman's terms, what do the revised growth figures say about the state of the recovery?
Well, I think that the recovery has been weak for a while. It should come as no surprise that it's continuing to be weak. The forecasts that were made at the beginning of the year were very conjectural. There were all kinds of things that were hard to predict. How much effect psychologically the change in administrations would have. I think that the administration, in making its February forecast, was in some ways very emboldened by the quite favorable news that came out right after the election. But I think many of us have been saying for some time that it's a weak recovery. The economy had been growing very sluggishly for a very great number of years before the recent recession. It went into the recession in weak shape. The recession itself hit very hard, and it's hard to argue that the recession did some of the cleaning out that recessions often do. So the recovery is weak. These numbers show it. I don't want to tweak Michael Boskin's nose, but I think rather than focusing on the Clinton administration for these numbers, we ought to take these as a measure more of the consequences of the previous 12 years of administration policy rather than the first 6 months of this administration's policy.
Or are they still Jimmy Carter's fault, Michael Boskin?
No, I think all that's kind of nonsense, and David knows it, and Alice knows it. What these numbers show is an economy which started to recover in March or April of 1991 and had an anemic first 3 quarters of recovery in the last 3 quarters of 1991, but grew at a solid almost 4% in 1992, is now growing at less than half that pace. The administration's official estimate is that they'll take an economy growing at 4% in 1992, cut that in half to 2%, and we'll have an average or below average year next year as well. My view is part of this, Alice is quite right, is due to the sluggishness in the rest of the world, particularly in Western Europe, other than Britain, and in Japan. The rest of Asia is doing okay, and Latin America is doing okay, but our large trading partners have been hurting. But it's also largely due to the effect of Clintonomics. Every business person I talk to has been very concerned about the impending and now in place, in some cases retroactive tax increases, not only on allegedly wealthy people, but also on many small businesses, the corporate tax increases, a variety of other things, and they're all very nervous about the uncertainty about health care. There's still a great deal of uncertainty